The mysterious story begins with two boys named Jack and David. They had set out on a 3-month trip to explore various places in Europe. After making their plans, they hit the road. Jack and David had always intended to travel to these places at least once in their lives, which is why they took a break from their jobs to come here. As they were traveling, they saw a truck carrying many ships. They climbed inside and started moving ahead with the help of the road. However, shortly after, the driver got out and told David and Jack that he was heading in a different direction, so they would have to continue on foot. David and Jack were somewhat pleased that the driver had helped them a bit, but as he left, he warned them to be careful and to stick to the road, advising them not to go anywhere else. This puzzled the two boys, but they began walking in the direction of the road. Eventually, Jack and David came across a pub that looked very old, and there was nothing else visible around. The pub sign was quite strange, but without giving it much thought, they went inside. As soon as David and Jack entered, all the people present started looking at them oddly. They felt a bit uncomfortable but still chose to sit down at a table. They were being watched with curious eyes, but they placed their order, and after hearing it, the patrons returned to their activities. While David and Jack were talking to each other, David pointed out a symbol that looked like a star. They didn't understand why such symbols were created, so they decided to ask the waitress about it. However, she did not provide any explanation and walked away. When the other patrons realized what the boys were discussing, they became angry with them. They started saying, "How do you not know about this? It's a very important thing that youngsters like you might not understand." The situation escalated to the point where everyone became angry with David and Jack, even scolding them and telling them to leave. With no option left, David and Jack had to step away from there for the time being. However, the others began to murmur that those two boys might be attacked by something dangerous. What that dangerous thing was would soon become clear. David and Jack then moved toward their next location, looking for a place to sleep for the night so they could leave early in the morning. As they continued walking, it started to rain, and the fog around them thickened significantly. Because of all this, they lost their way and ended up going in a different direction. They began to feel scared when they heard very strange and eerie sounds coming from all around, as if some creature was howling continuously. These terrifying noises grew louder, prompting them to decide they should probably return to the pub. But when they turned around, the path was completely filled with fog, making it impossible to see the way back. Suddenly, they felt something strange charging toward them. As it turned out, a dangerous werewolf appeared right in front of Jack and attacked him directly. David was shocked and didn't know how to save his friend. The werewolf severely injured Jack, tearing him apart and killing him, after which it turned its attention to David, who was frozen in fear. Fortunately for David, nearby villagers arrived and attacked the werewolf with their guns. The werewolf fell and died right there. In his last moments of consciousness, David saw that the werewolf that the villagers had killed had transformed back into a man, who died right there. David couldn't comprehend what had just happened, and he fainted. A little while later, David opened his eyes in a hospital. Many nurses were in the lab explaining to David that the person who attacked his friend seemed like a strange man, as if someone had instructed him to do this. But David had seen with his own eyes that it wasn't a man, it was a dangerous wolf that had attacked him and his friend. Dr. Harris couldn't understand these claims, so he called in 2 detectives to investigate what David had experienced. They presented their report, saying, "When we examined the body of the dead man, it became clear that he was just a madman who, on someone's orders, killed your friend Jack." But David insisted to the detectives that it wasn't a man but a wolf that had attacked them. The detectives didn't believe him at all, as they had no evidence to confirm that it was indeed a wolf. As a result, the doctors concluded that David might have suffered a head injury and needed to rest to recover. This was the reason he was still admitted to the hospital. For David's care, a nurse named Alex was assigned as his private nurse, always looking after him. One night, while David was sleeping in his bed, he suddenly began to have visions in which he saw himself running naked in a forest. He felt changes occurring in his body, but he couldn't comprehend what they were. After some time, David woke up from these nightmares and asked the doctor what was happening to him. The doctor simply replied, "As long as you don't rest, these visions will keep coming. You have suffered a head injury." David wanted to leave that place because he felt suffocated there, but he stayed because of the beautiful nurse, Alex, who spoke to him in a very kind manner. David continued to have many visions, and in one of them, he saw his face transforming into a strange monster, which frightened him even more. The doctor was called, and he told Alex to give David his medication, which would help him recover. Alex fed David his medicine by hand and read him stories to help him fall asleep. David looked at Alex with affectionate eyes, as if he had started to like her, but Alex was just doing her nursing duties. That night, David had another nightmare in which he found himself at home. Suddenly, a group of gangsters wearing masks invaded and brutally attacked his entire family. David watched helplessly as his parents were killed right before his eyes, and now they were holding a knife to his throat. As they set fire to the house, David was filled with fear and jolted awake, finding Alex right in front of him. Although he didn't tell Alex everything, he said, "I had a bad dream, please try to make me feel better." Alex went to pull back the curtains to let in sunlight, but as she did, the masked men appeared and killed her. David was terrified and woke up again, realizing he was still in a vision, and Alex was unharmed and safe. The next day, a large breakfast was brought to David, which he enjoyed. But suddenly, the ghost of his dead friend, Jack, appeared before him. Jack's condition was horrific, his body was severely damaged, and he kept approaching David. David thought it was another vision, but it felt all too real. Jack came closer and said, "The one who bit us isn't just a normal wolf, it was a werewolf, called a lycanthrope. These lycanthropes bite others to increase their numbers, turning them into their kind. Anyone bitten by one will transform into a werewolf within 4 days, on the night of the full moon. And we only have 2 days left before we become werewolves." Jack had been bitten more severely, so the effects were happening to him faster. He explained to David that if he turned into a werewolf, he would have to increase its quantity. Jack was saying that they should bite other people so that those people could also be converted into werewolves, which would gradually increase their population and allow them to rule over humans. However, David still didn't believe any of this, so he immediately called Alex over. When Alex came to David, Jack had already left. David kissed Alex and said, "Jack was here, and I feel so lonely. Please don't ever leave me." It seemed that Alex had started to like David as well, which is why she didn't leave him alone. The next day, David was discharged from the hospital and was walking with Alex toward a market. They talked a lot and were happy together. Alex usually didn't bring people to her apartment because she preferred to be alone, but she had started to like David, so she brought him there. They became comfortable with each other and even took a shower together, enjoying each other's company. While David was resting in a room, he suddenly saw his dead friend, Jack. Shocked, David brought Jack into another room, still not believing that Jack was real. Jack simply told David, "Tomorrow night is the full moon, and that day will be very painful for you because you are going to transform into something else. So be careful and watch out for the people around you." After a while, Alex came in, and Jack disappeared. David and Alex cuddled up together again. Then, we see Dr. Harris, who was beginning to believe David's claims. To confirm everything, he went to the same place where they had talked. After entering the pub, he found many old men sitting inside, and he asked them about the 2 American boys. But all the people there denied knowing anything about the boys and told Harris to leave. After not receiving permission to stay, Harris headed back to his car, where he met a man who said, "I saw those 2 boys. Adam and Jack were bitten by a dangerous wolf, and the young man who witnessed this warned that everyone around David was in great danger." An old man shouted at the young man to explain everything, and he fled the scene. However, Harris still didn't understand the whole situation, so he headed toward David. Meanwhile, David, who was in his apartment, was getting bored, so he turned on the TV. It was the night of the full moon, and something strange was about to happen to David. Suddenly, he felt an intense heat, and before he knew it, thick hair began to grow all over his body. Large claws appeared on his hands, and his body started to enlarge. On this full moon night, he was indeed transforming into a wolf. The transformation quickly became dangerous, and David turned into a fearsome werewolf. David became completely out of control and started running in search of victims to kill. We see a couple walking down a quiet street, happily preparing for their wedding. But shortly after, the werewolf appeared before them and brutally killed both of them. Now that David had become a werewolf, he showed no mercy towards normal humans and continued to hunt for more victims. Next, we see 3 poor men sitting and relaxing in a place. Suddenly, their dog started barking, signaling that David, now a werewolf, was approaching them. The men heard a growl and, to their horror, the werewolf stood right in front of them. They screamed, but they had no chance to escape. The werewolf seized the 3 men and killed them before heading straight to a metro station, where he caught and killed another man on an escalator. The next day, David opened his eyes, now back in his normal form. He found himself inside a zoo, completely naked, with no memory of what he had done or how he got there. Still in shock, he quietly slipped away from the zoo without anyone noticing him. He took a balloon from a child while escaping with his belongings to save his property. David also stole some ladies' clothes and wore them to head straight to Alex's house. When Alex saw David in this state, she asked him what happened, but David replied that when he opened his eyes, he found himself inside a zoo. However, Alex thought David was joking, so she didn't think much of it. Now we see Dr. Harris, who reads in the newspaper that 4 people were brutally killed last night. He doesn't quite understand how these incidents relate to him, but he is somehow connecting them to David. Dr. Harris then calls Alex to inquire about David, warning her that David's behavior might be strange, so she should keep her distance. While David is playing with Alex, she reassures him that he is completely fine. They both get into a cab to go out and explore. David is getting closer to Alex and expressing his affection for her when the cab driver mentions the 4 people who died brutally last night. Hearing this shocks David, and he becomes serious, realizing that what Jack had said was true. He is also starting to transform into a werewolf. Feeling the weight of this revelation, David begins to distance himself from Alex without telling her. However, Alex follows him, refusing to be left behind. David runs to a police officer and confesses, "I am the werewolf who killed 4 people. Please arrest me and put me in jail." A crowd gathers around them, but the police officer responds that he can't arrest anyone without evidence. Alex, confused and worried, asks David why he is behaving this way. Finally, David reveals to Alex, "I am the wrong man." He kisses her and starts to run away. His speed has increased, making it difficult for Alex to catch him. Outside a theater, David sees Jack, who urges him to come inside. When David enters the theater, he finds the dead bodies of all the people who had been killed, and to his shock, they are able to speak. They all say that they need to die in some other way, like getting hit by a train or getting shot. David doesn't understand what to do, but suddenly it's revealed that it's the night of the full moon, and he is starting to fully transform into a werewolf. Gradually, his body changes in a terrifying way, and now, he kills everyone present in the theater. By the time the police officers find out, the werewolf has already escaped and has come into the city to attack people. This time, he shows no fear and injures everyone he encounters. When an officer approaches him with a gun, the werewolf bites off his head. Terror spreads around as this dangerous wolf shows no mercy. The police force arrives, preparing to take down the werewolf. Meanwhile, Dr. Harris comes to Alex, urging her to come with him to find David because she needs to know what he is doing. The police officers have cornered the werewolf into a dead end. Alex rushes to David, pushing past the police officers, now aware that the werewolf is David, who has somehow transformed into this creature. Alex tries to convince David that he will be killed if he doesn't behave properly. She believes that speaking to him gently will bring him back. Despite being in werewolf form, David starts to show some change in his facial expressions, indicating he can understand Alex. However, he is still a wild beast and begins to attack her. Seeing this, the police officers fire their weapons, and the werewolf is shot down. Gradually, David returns to his original form and takes his last breaths. Alex stands in front of him, watching him die, realizing that she will have to live without him. And this is where our story ends.